Good afternoon, Indiana Kentucky Conference. My name is the Reverend Chad Abbott, and I am the conference minister here, and coming to you live from Indianapolis. And I'm also joined by our general minister and president, the Reverend Dr. John C. Dorhauer. John, it's great to have you on the show with us.
Always good to be with you, Chad, and with the good people of the Indiana Kentucky Conference. A
Uh,
delight.
we're, we're glad to have you. And friends, as you know, we're coming up on our last couple of episodes around Valerie Kaur's revolutionary love wheel, and we have been going through each section of the wheel, dealing with one word, and we've been using our General Synod delegates, and so we decided to bring on our General Minister and President and one of our last couple, and going to address the word transition. And this is on the last end of the wheel. We dealt with breathe, and last week was push, and so this week we're going to be dealing with transition. So we're going to start with just allowing the video that she has on her Learning Hub website to guide us as we get our conversation started. So give me 1 second to share my screen.
Transition is both a noun and a verb. Transition is the fiery process that is required to move from one reality to another. To transition, so transition as a verb, to transition, it's to summon the courage to stay in the labors of love and justice for ourselves, for others, even when we want to give up. It requires us to draw upon our deepest wisdom in order to birth something new in us and the world around us. This is how transitioning becomes an act of revolutionary love.
Oh, John, don't you just love her? There's so
I
much in
do.
that. I mean, that was 45 seconds of lots to think about it. And one of the words that came up for me, John, um, when she was speaking, is that the word transition feels like a liminal word for me.
It is.
How does it sit with you?
It is a liminal word, and let's be honest, we're living in a liminal period of time,
Yeah,
and we are in the process of transitioning from one way of being to another, and that's true of the church. It's true of the
yeah.
world. I love the birthing metaphor that she uses throughout her work, and that's what this feels like. And transition has both joy attached to it. The birthing is a delight, a joy, and it has a deep pain attached to it. It's not easy getting through this liminal time from one way of being to another.
Well, what you just said reminded me of that part of our denomination where we talk about the cost and the joy of discipleship. Right? Is this feeling of it's not one or the other all the time. It involves both, and the birthing of something new. It does require entering into the pain. And I think one of the things about this revolutionary love piece is that it's certainly not one of those frameworks that focuses on, oh, just the positive, or that it's somehow one of those things where we're not going to deal with the tough things. Of course, what she is saying, if we really want to see a new world, if we really want to see justice, we actually have to. She used the word push right before this, and I don't think that's an accident. We actually have to push through all of the transitions that are taking place to actually see the new life on the other side.
And both inertia slash comfort and fear slash resistance often mitigate against not just the pushing, but the desire to keep pushing.
Oh yeah,
So it's not just the pain, it's
right,
the comfort level with what was and the
right.
fear about what might be that we don't yet know that that calls for, to use another phrase from our statement of faith, courage in the struggle. Right,
Right,
you talked about the
right,
cost and joy of discipleship. It
right.
takes courage in the struggle, because the temptation through the time and the pain of transition will be to hang on to that which was familiar and to resist the unknown yet to be discovered.
Yeah. It's funny, John. We in the Indiana Kentucky Conference had started a transitional ministry training for our conference, and some of it was born out of a desire to get more transitional and interim clergy.
Mhm.
It's not to replace interim ministry training, the robust one, but it's more of a framework. And one of the things that we talked about was using that word transitional in a way that says, is not transitional ministry not just when you lose the pastor to retirement or to resignation to another church, but is not all of ministry a form of paying attention to the transitions that are taking place? And how do we help clergy, even who, they've been there 8 years and have no desire to leave, love where they're going, trying to imagine a new future? That transition actually is a part of a life cycle of a church. It's not just when there is a some sort of removal of a pastoral role. And so we actually worked with Dick Ham and
Oh
had
yeah.
him come in and talk about transition size of churches, whether you're moving down from like 250 in worship to 150, or you've got 80 in worship and you're now at 130. What does transition look like? It feels to me like transition has the capacity for us to think about moving from one space, as she said in the video, to another in a way. And that isn't that all ministry, right?
It is. It's all life. I remember my
Oh yeah.
first year of my of college, acquiring my philosophy degree, learning about the philosophy of Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher,
Right.
who said you can never step into the same river twice.
Right.
And what he was saying is that life is a constant changing, transitioning,
Yeah.
and nothing is ever the same. What also occurs to me about this training that you're doing with clergy and local churches, acknowledging that even if they intend to stay, they're engaged in transitional ministry. What occurs to me is I saw a video this morning and it showed the earth revolving around the sun, that the planet's actually revolving around the sun, while at the same time, the sun is spinning at like 70,000 miles an hour around the galaxy.
Right.
And so if we look at transition from the local church level, you can see the movement in that local church, even with an established pastor, of transitioning from one way of being to another. But at the same time, that local church is a part of a larger ecclesiastical community that is itself going through a period of change. And it is a part of a culture and a world and a human community that is going through. And so these transitions are happening in multiple levels, multiple
Right.
layers simultaneously, and not always in the same direction.
Right. That's fascinating. I'm also thinking here a little bit of two things that are interrelated, and one is Octavia Butler's idea of that God is change, right? And that change is not just again one of those like moments that happens every once in a while, but that it's constant. It's actually built into the fabric of the universe as you just described, right? But I think also in some ways this is one of the learnings for me from the pandemic, has been that by inertia or desperation or just by the sheer fact that it's built into the universe, we have to deal with change at some point in time. And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit to this idea of transition at where we are at right now in the pandemic. I mean, like, because I would hesitate to say we're post pandemic in any way. I think we're at another phase of the pandemic that might be teaching us something else as well, as we're looking to try to find some sort of, I don't want to even use the word normalcy, but just some form of active ministry in the church that makes sense in this moment. What have you seen in our churches that makes sense to talk about with transition in the pandemic?
What I've seen is that we are an amazingly adaptive organism, this church. Even as we talk about our resistance to transition and change, the truth is we are an incredibly diverse and adaptive organism. And when the pandemic hit, literally overnight, we have clergy who for generations knew how to do what was expected of them and when to do it and by what manner to do it. And all of that meant nothing within days.
Yeah.
And they did what they had to do. What I observe is that we're beat up, we're tired, we're traumatized, we're grief stricken, we're
Yeah.
exhausted. And what I observe is that we have to muster the resources to go through it all again, because as you said, it's not over.
Yeah.
And when it is over, what we formerly recognized as normal is lost to us. Mm-hmm. And what that means is a whole new kind of energy and enthusiasm is going to have to resurface out of the trauma and the grief in order to push through the next birthing. Because it's not a return to what was, it's a discovery of what will be. And we're not there yet. That will come. We're not there yet.
One of the things I've noticed, John, is that it in some ways is, and we've been asking this a little bit in our conference visioning piece, but I'm seeing it in other ways too, is gravitating towards, okay, so what really does matter? And so we were living in spaces where it was like, well, we did this for years, and the ministry we knew we had done it this way for years, but now we're in a space where like it just ripped that out of its context that we had it for years, and now all of a sudden it looks like, well, okay, I don't know what's next, and there's so much uncertainty, unknown. The question then arises, well, what really matters? And we have in the conference been using the language of a question, which is, does it bring life? And if it doesn't bring life, then why are we doing it? Or what does it have to say to us if it doesn't really offer a sense of life to us? It's just something that we're doing. So what you said to me just a minute ago about the church emerging out of this, whenever that might be, in a new framework, says to me, yeah, we have to gravitate and put energy and any resiliency we have towards something that God is doing new among us.
Yeah. One of the thoughts that occur to me as you talk about the rubric of does it bring life is, for me, that's less important in terms of engaging what we say no to as we move forward, because there are going to be things that we say no to that still have the potential to bring life. Does it make sense for us to do the exchange of peace in a post-pandemic world? We don't know. Does it bring life? You could argue that, but it may not be an important. The test of does it bring life is the test when we ask for permission to introduce something new to us in the time of transition that feels out of place and unfamiliar.
Yeah.
If it gives life, say yes to it. Yeah. And whether it continues to give life, we will discern collectively, but give yourself permission to say yes to it. And for me, the most important thing is to trust the movement of the Holy Spirit, who has not abandoned the church ever, and certainly not through this time of pandemic, and who is, on behalf of a church that she continues to love, is very interested in identifying creative, energetic leaders who will find those things that will give life on the other side of this. Trust her. Yeah. She will walk with us through this every step of the way.
That is the promise and the assurance. I know, John, we're bringing this time to a close, but one of the things you told me very early on when I became conference minister, which I still hold pretty dear, is that your greatest advocate is always going to be in this work going to be the Holy Spirit. And so I appreciate you kind of naming that for us in this space, because I think that many of us are trying to find our way to transitioning from whatever salvageable things we have from what was towards whatever new things the Holy Spirit is bringing. And what I heard in her video was that transition is hard. We have to find the resiliency to push through. What word, and in closing, just a brief word, what word of encouragement would you give our churches and pastors as they make that push and continuing to push through the transition?
The single word is trust.
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 Amen.
When it's hard to see what's coming and why it needs to come, trust. The Holy Spirit will see us through this.
John, it's wonderful to have you with us, and wonderful to be with all of you in the Indiana, Kentucky Conference. And next week will be our final word. The word is joy, and I look forward to having more conversation about that. It'll be a little longer next week. But John, thank you for being with us this week.
Always a pleasure and a delight, Chad. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.